Okay, hi guys. My guest today is Dr. Annie Graziani, founder of Sovera Strategy Company and newly minted Doctor of Education from the University of Pennsylvania. Annie spent 20 years inside organizations like LVMH and Tapestry, watching exceptional people burn out in structures designed for a workforce that no longer exists. Annie, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Vlad.
So let's start right into it. You spent about 2 decades inside some of the most demanding organizations in fashion and retail before founding Sovera. What was the moment that made you realize the problem wasn't the people, but actually the structure they were working inside?
So for me, that happened actually after I left working in corporate structures. I think I had the ideas and the observations of that something wasn't right when I was still working inside of corporate. When I was working in New York City fashion, it was an incredible leadership structure. I think watching what worked and also kind of witnessing things that weren't working so well were part of my awareness, and it definitely lent to my desire to understand that more deeply and also to put more than instinct behind it, more than observation. I ended up working in the tech industry for quite some time, and then I had exposure to understanding by having been witness to many different kinds of organizations through the work that I was doing in the tech industry, having exposure to different kinds of companies and what was similar about all of them and what was different and unique about each of them, witnessing sort of like what was really going on there too. Again, observing, just paying attention, kind of adopting these ideas and a little bit of validation on some of those perceptions. When I decided to go back to earn my doctorate, that was when everything really kind of synthesized. That's when I really started to understand that it wasn't just my observations, that the human experience in the workplace and structural kind of constraints that kind of directed the way that people sort of feel and experience the workplace in their lives became much more validated with now data, with as I was socializing the topic of my dissertation and how it was resonating with others, I felt like these were not just my observations. It's not just something that I sort of theoretically thought about anymore. I decided to actually develop my entire research design around understanding that and emerging those stories from the reality, the human lived experiences of others. And so it was because of the research and maybe through the research and somewhere in the doctoral journey that I started to realize our social structures are really, especially here in the United States, are not built for the evolution of human awareness and our adoption of things like technology and just the way that family structures have evolved, educational structures have not evolved as much, and also our workplace structures and how we metric people have not evolved as much. So when I started to look at what that equation looks like, it really happened during the doctoral journey that I became more acutely aware that we are operating in a constrained way under or within structures that really don't serve human potential and motivate human purpose. And so that is why Sovera exists, is to sort of, inject that kind of that awareness and for more people.
Interesting. Right away, several thoughts that are coming to my mind. You mentioned that you came to notice some things that maybe were not visible for some leaders inside the organization and so on. Could you expand on it?
I think that some behaviors, and this is not just necessarily in the organizations that I worked for or within, but just kind of like more broadly and especially end capped by my participants kind of emerging these realities as well. There's a lack of transparency. Much of it starts with communication and a lack of transparency on where the organization is going and how it's evolving to get there. And also the people in proximity to problems, right? Those who are among the workforce, those who are actually doing the work on a day-to-day basis. I'm not saying leaders aren't doing work. They're doing different work in a different capacity. But those who are actually executing the vision, if they don't actually know what they're working toward or why they're doing it, number one, they can't optimize their contribution to enabling that vision or realizing what the organization is going after. And number two, that's when people start to question, why am I here? Right. And then it becomes sort of this awareness of, or just a line of questions about where else could I go? And am I valued here? And if there's communication happening and people really know what they're working for and what they want personally is in line with that, then, having known that by asking questions and getting closer to what those humans are actually experiencing creates a closer culture, a closer knit kind of community toward directing and enacting or executing the vision that leadership has, or the shareholders have, or the board of directors have for where the company is going. Then people can take agency over deciding whether or not this is where they choose to engage, right? If they want to contribute to this particular place, and then it's a matter of leaders engaging why they should want to contribute here. So there are a lot of learnings throughout that entire. Those observations, but then supported by the data and the research. So I think transparency is a big one. Communication, of course, is another big one. And then I think respecting, the other thing I think is, not that I think, but that the data shows is the people that are actually doing the work having some level of respect that they were brought here to serve a purpose in this organization, to lend their time and talent to something that lends toward a bigger vision. And when those things, they evolve, they change. Every year, there could be a different thing that's motivating the organization toward a goal. And so it does go back to transparency and communication, but also what's motivating the individuals. Asking them is really important. Sharing what they're contributing toward is really important. People really want to know that they're being respected for the contribution that they're making or that they can make. So there's to end cap that part of the conversation, there's also an ambition kind of component that matters a lot. What do people aspire to? What do they see for themselves? What do they want? What do they want out of their engagement with this organization, or in their life goals? It sounds a little soft, but it's not actually, because it's what keeps the good people is understanding that. Showing empathy toward that matters a lot. Everybody has some reason to be. I'm a firm believer that we all have a reason to walk the earth. And it's not always altruistic, it's not always good, but everybody has a reason to be here, and we have learnings and contribution to each other, complementary to each other, that we deserve to understand about each other. And what that means in the workplace is where Sovera sort of sits at the intersection of that, emerging that, evolving that, and helping to bridge, really kind of just create bridges across the organization.
Interesting. So you are telling that basically the foundation for a great organization structure and the great culture for keeping great talents is actually have this vision aligned and transparency from the leaders to people who actually execute. So this is mainly the foundation for so the organization can operate well, I think.
Yeah, I think it's foundational, right, to organizations operating well. The question then can become, and what's the value in that? Why, we have a narrative that everyone is replaceable. And that is true. Everyone is replaceable. There's plenty of talent out there in the world. The question is, at what cost, right? What does it cost the organization or the humans? Or if we're really looking at it from a more macro perspective, what is it costing society, right? And that can be in like our local economy, our family economies, our community economies, national economy, competitive, globally. How are we really looking at what is the value of keeping the good people in the workplace, contributing in a way that is aligned with the empowerment that the organization can bring to those people, but also to the organization. So part of, what we talk about through Sovera is that people and profits empower each other. And I firmly believe that, but I don't just believe it, the data shows it. And so, there's often a gap there because we have this narrative that everyone is replaceable. Again, yes, and at a cost. And at what cost, right? If they leave, they take all that institutional knowledge, the efficiencies and all the things. If we understand from them what it takes to keep them there, it's actually really typically not complaining. And it's relatively marginal asks that they're asking, that they need in order to stay in this place that would make them so much happier and keep them contributing in a more meaningful way. And then you just tighten that relationship. So I think all of that is worth something. It's worth understanding that and hearing it and then putting dollars to what that means to organizations. There is an ROI attached to it.
Yes, definitely. I'm also an evangelist of education and investing in people. There's also some jokes between managers that are speaking about what if we will invest in our employees and they will leave, and other asks what if we won't invest and they will stay. So this is actually
True.
the big one. And during this era of AI and unemployment is going higher, we are as entrepreneurs also are obligated to invest in people and give their this path to just grow and be in this role. So yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, I think that, there is an awareness and there has been sort of an awakening, particularly since the pandemic, among the workforce. And there was sort of like an equalizing moment, right, where everyone was experiencing the same global impact at the same time, maybe in varying ways, but we really were all experiencing something at the same time. It kind of created some amount of equality among the hierarchy. And so whether you were in the C-suite or, at a senior executive level or someone doing the work who's just trying to hold it together in the background, what we realized is we were all doing that, right? My reality here, this is my background, right? This is what goes on in the back of my life. I've got kids in the background, right? And that became not permission, but the reality was no longer hidden behind a curtain. We weren't covering to pretend a certain way in the workplace as we were in our personal lives. Now, there is some amount of, etiquette and behavior that I think we've also lost because of the pandemic, the way that we behave professionally and respectfully in organizations because of all this reality that became known to the world. All of our, we all kind of became a little bit more inside of each other's personal worlds, right? We just did because that's just what the world called for at the time. Some of that deserves to be retained. Some of it needs to be polished up again in how we behave with each other and interact with each other. And some of that has sort of left the workforce too. We had a meaningful generational shift during and since the pandemic. And a lot of those learnings are, my fear is that we have an opportunity, a meaningful opportunity for knowledge transfer to happen. And if we're not grabbing onto those opportunities through apprenticeship and mentorship, we will lose a lot of what exists and need to exist in how we behave in the workplace. So,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, so true, so true. Yes. By the way, I have this big topic I want to unpack, and you're the right person to speak about it. Why do you think most people in the organization leave? Because people are always, not always, but often blame their compensations, the burnouts, and so on. But what are the actual reasons the people can handle to be in this role?
I think it depends on what motivates each individual, and understanding that is critical, right? So if people are motivated by compensation, then it's worth understanding that, so you can decide, so leaders can decide if that's the reason, if that's a reason worth keeping people. More often than not, though, what I found, especially in my research, is that people leave when they feel that they aren't respected for what they can contribute. So in other words, we hire adults who are skilled and trained to fill a certain need inside of an organization. If we're overstaffing or we're just throwing people at problems, that also emerges, right? That's when mass layoffs happen, or we say, oh, we have to start to trim, whatever it is. So it's really acutely aligning the right people in the right positions when people start to meet the objectives of the organization. So it is much about alignment. And one of my peers in the program is actually writing a dissertation on alignment, organizational alignment, and the value of that. So that'll hopefully be coming out in a year from now. But I think what drives people to leave organizations is when they start to feel like their expertise or their contribution is not valued, or they have no idea how to direct or share that contribution in the workplace because they don't know what they're contributing to. What is the bigger vision, right? So they become a little disenchanted and like, well, I have all this talent, I have this stuff that I want to be able to offer here, but I don't know where to place it in contribution because I have no idea what we're rowing toward. So I think those are the big reasons, yeah. I mean, there are obvious ones, right? Like if managers are not supportive of their employees, that's a huge, obvious, most of us know that we leave bosses, not companies and things like that. These are regular narratives in the workplace. That's 100% true. There are very obvious things, but what's really getting down to the heart of it, I would say, is human purpose, right? And like shining your light through your work. Your work is like, for me, it's like keeping a clean house is important to me too, right? But, and for many people, right, keeping things tidy and organized is how I feel good about certain things. That works for some. Some people don't care about that, but most all of us care about how we contribute to the workplace and that our work is important in some way. It gives us pride in something to feel good about, right? It's more about the challenge and accomplishment than it is about actually compensation.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. By the way, how you indicate and find these things while consulting organizations within your company? So, what are your checklist for finding all these issues that are the major trigger for people want to leave?
Yeah. So our approach through Sovera is that this is a third-party research entity, right? We exist to bring and bring out the truths of the people through their voice in an anonymous way, to a third-party trusted partner. So the C-suite would hire us, right? But it's completely confidential in how we operate and understand and emerge the stories from the voice of the people. If it's in-house, there's an argument, right? It's different. If it's in-house and it's HR or CPOs or C-suite, whoever it is, leading these types of research initiatives, it's great. If organizations are doing that, it's terrific. It's really good. And surveys are helpful as well. They complement the data. But you're going to get a different, more comprehensive version of of the human reality if it's from the outside, because it's trusted as a confidential entity in which it is. So our approach is we speak directly and must speak directly with the C-suite, whoever the leaders are who are making decisions. And usually it's the CEO or board of directors who are creating the vision. And then it's the peers on the C-suite, right, who are, through their functional areas, executing that vision through their people, through the people on their teams, through their functional silos, we'll say. Sovera exists to learn what that vision is. What are those objectives? And typically it's 1 to 3 objectives in, say, 3 to 5 years or 1 to 3 years, something like that. It's relatively clear, right? Increase profit margins, grow into different geographies, reduce costs, whatever it is, right size the workforce, adopt AI, digital initiatives, things like that. There are usually just a few of them that are important, and that's just sort of a little menu of what I've heard. Then it's a matter of, okay, great. we as Sovera need to go in and understand from the people, do they know that that's the object, that these are the objectives or the objective? And if they don't, that's the first bridge. Once that's shared with the people, then it's a matter of asking them from their perspective, what's in the way of that becoming a reality, either from an organizational support standpoint, what's going on among the people being able to lend their talents in a way that helps that to become realized. So it's interviews. And by the way, without sacrificing their well-being. So there's a relationship between well-being and productivity, and you'll find in there things like respect, understanding their ambition, what do they care about, right? Who are they outside of work? Not getting nosy about any details in particular, but just understanding that there is life outside of work. People are multidimensional, and respecting that and understanding like what is in the way of you doing your best work here to enable this vision or these objectives, whatever it is. Emerging all of that truth is the protocols that I employ, right? With my team of researchers, we go into organizations, deploy, and emerge all of this data. Once that data is emerged, then it's sort of like the magic happens, right? That's magical in and of itself because we're getting so much information. And then what we're doing is converting all that data, we're building it into metrics, findings and metrics, just like any dissertation, right? And delivering it back to the C-suite to say, here's what's really going on in your company. Here's what the people are saying. You have a vision. This is what's going to prevent it or what's going to enable it. And then delivering that back and attaching it to ROI. There has to be a value of financial and economic impact to hearing from the voice of the people. Most organizations are not doing this because many say that they do it for the well-being of the people, whatever it is, policies, supports, surveys, all this stuff. Unless there's a value to that, then some things fall flat, right? Or they start to fizzle and die after a survey or after an interview protocol are deployed. So then there are checks beyond that. So we can do like pulse checks throughout to understand what's really going on. Is it sticking? Is it not sticking? How do we course correct and all of that?
Interesting. By the way, what kind of metrics are you generally applying to? So, except of turnover rate, for example.
All sorts of things, right? There are tons of things, and there really are only a handful that matter. But there's a laundry list of things that we could metric against, depending on, and that's unique to each organization. So I have my list, right? It's almost always going to be retention and engagement or disengagement. And then understanding from the voice of the people, what do they need? And then whatever emerges from that line of questions, result in some amount of metrics. It might be, people want more time off. Okay, well, what does that equal in dollars? And how does that relate to productivity? Or more sick day, or whatever it is. Or people would like to leave an hour earlier so they don't have to pay for childcare on top of childcare in a day's effort, right? So some of my participants, for example, they were maybe paying for daycare, and then they had to pay a nanny to pick up the child, and then they'd have or maybe they'd have aftercare and then a nanny pick up from aftercare. So they have 3 moments of investment and coverage for their child because they needed to extend their day by 1 extra hour. So what would it mean to that person if they could leave an hour earlier to not have to hire somebody else to basically parent their child for that last hour of the day? Those kinds of things, right? It can get very nuanced. And so that has to emerge first and can relate to the metrics.
So you're first fixing the foundation, the core things, and then focusing on nuances, some edge cases, for example, like the case you mentioned with Nanny.
There's that. There's also, there's the whole approach to, and much of what I talk about with Sovera as well, or through Sovera, is that our workforce is changing. So this is workforce transformation, right? We have never, in almost 100 years, restructured work as we know it since the Industrial Revolution era, when we installed 40-hour work weeks to protect work-life balance. That's what it was then. We have not evolved that, and we've had meaningful evolutions in human reality since then. We just haven't changed the structures to honor, to sort of, evolve with it. We haven't. We haven't changed our educational structures, and we haven't, not in a meaningful way, unless you're privileged enough to seek out alternative approaches to education, right, for children who are produced in a way, or cultivated in a way, or conformed in a way, arguably, to deliver in an Industrial Revolution era structural kind of architecture. And this has been since the 60s or 70s, right? When we had here, at least here in America, we had the rights movements happening. I mean, some people have worked always, right? This is let's be fair that there are certain demographics among us who have never had an evolution. They've always been working, right? And they may not have always done product-based work, by the way. So you can imagine what those kind of efforts would have looked like, or have looked like. But those who, we decided on this narrative that, you pile into good schools, right? Get good grades, and then you'll spin out and achieve a certain level of success in career and in life. And if you really think about it, the definition of success is prescribed for us. It's a perception sort of placed upon us. And what that is actually whatever we want it to be. And so if we redefine what we as individuals want for success and what we care about as our priorities, then you can reverse engineer where it all starts. And it starts in the educational structures that feeds this channel. And it's a feeder to industrial workplace structures, which is 40-hour work weeks and all the other components that kind of firmly hold that as a pillar. And so what we have to do is really think about the last 60 plus years when knowledge workers started, to emerge, and we shifted from blue collar industrial work by and large. Obviously these trades and skilled workers and industrial workers still exist, and they must, by the way, and they'll also be less affected by AI. So, but they are the mainstay of what holds society together. But those who were told to shift into knowledge work and go to school or get certifications or degrees or whatever, the work structures have not been built for them because it's not product-based work. I mean, maybe coding and certain things like that, sure. How much you code in a certain hour or whatever in a day, okay. But for most people, it's judgment calls. It's objectives-based, and we have to remodel structures around getting the work done, not about the hours that we're putting in. And it's become less about, I mean, my research shows flexibility, autonomy, and trust are the primary three sort of like big, large there are many critical findings within, but if I were to sort of like summarize it, it's flexibility, autonomy, and trust. And that is like trust to get the work done and know that people are adults and they have been hired for a certain reason to meet certain objectives, and we have to let them do it, but they have to know what they're working toward. So that's kind of like the summary of the research. Yeah.
Definitely. Yes. We should expect from intellectual workers where the creativity is involved, we actually should expect the outcome of their deliverables and the actual intellectual product there that are producing, not the number of hours that they worked through the week. So this is actually should be redesigned from the scratch.
Exactly.
Yes. I want to also unpack some topic which is related to how you, through all your career and all your observations, how do you think the checklist for the broken organization look like? So how the organization that is broke looks like inside, not from the org charts, but from the person experiencing on a Tuesday morning, for example.
So are you asking what does that look like for an organization to course correct that, or from the person, from the individual?
Yes, from organization and from the person, yes.
So this is what, this is exactly why Sovera exists, right? From the organizational side, it's this alignment conversation, for sure. So, what organizations can do, Sun's hiring somebody like Sovera to come in and do this work and show them sort of what's really going on inside of organizations, that diagnostics. It's any organization can listen to the people, right? And hear their voices. It's the difference is third party versus in-house. But empathy you've got to hire that or train it. And I don't know that everyone is trainable, by the way, right? Because there has to be some amount of willingness or interest in why it matters. If there's interest and willingness, it can be trained. That's just my personal belief. And so I would say the checklist is ask the people because they know the answers. They also know how to solve the problems. And if they don't know, they'll say that too, and then you know what to do. Like any of that information, any of collecting that data will tell you and give leaders some amount of direction on what to do, what's available inside and what isn't. Then you can go outside. For the individuals, this is meaningful because Sovera's also got a channel to work directly with individuals. So our objective through Sovera is to redesign workplace structures from top down, right? Because that's how we make big change happen for many, many people. Hundreds of people at any given time, or thousands of people inside of large organizations can be impacted when the C-suite is adopting, work from a company like Sovera, and we're not the only ones out there, but like Sovera, to influence and change the way the human experience of work in their organization. So that's where Sovera started. That's very, very important because that's many, many people can be positively impacted by that awareness. From the bottom up, right, from the individuals. When I say bottom up, I mean people among us all over the place who have become constrained by their circumstances because of how we've defined success, because of how we've cultivated and conditioned a pattern in people, right? We've said this, keep the guardrails up and go this way. For those people who just know it doesn't feel right, then we have also a different channel to honor those needs. And that is like, how do people kind of prioritize their dimensions of who they are? So we all are multidimensional, as I mentioned earlier, and it's a matter of who are we now in this season of life? And that's different to everybody. What matters to you is different than what matters to me, which is different than what matters to who I was in my 20s or in my 30s. And so, and what those priorities were then versus now, it's like, what levers do I pull to get, it's almost like supply and demand, right? It's like getting what I have in my capacity and in my prioritization aligned with how I'm executing my life. So it's the same thing brought down to an individual level or brought into an individual level. So Sovera also serves that, right? Where it's like, how do we help individuals gain agency and really sovereignty, which is where Sovera, what it's named after, to direct and design their lives in a way that is in line. So again, the alignment conversation with their human purpose, their human potential, right? Their why they exist, and their priorities in this moment. How do we help more flourish and more people live their purpose? And when we do that, then I think we start to correct our behaviors in society. We start to kind of move the pendulum away from where we've been for a long time, which is, pretty short-sighted and largely a lot of greed-based kind of approaches to how we get things done. It's like, okay, well, if we're not elevating all, then we're just going to continue down the cycle out of control, right? It's like a freight train spiraling out of control in the wrong direction. We want to bring that back for as many people as we can. And so that's the direct to individual channel, the business to consumer channel, we'll say more corporately, that we also serve to exist. We don't want to abandon the individuals who also need help and hope. And that's the B2C channel.
Yes, great. Great vision, by the way. What is maybe the time period between where are you helping these people and where their behavior actually changing, maybe from organization as well? So the difference between the vision and then the execution, when this execution is when the organization can proceed with it.
I'll approach each one separately. So each channel, separately. So for organizations, it really depends on how many people are inside of the company. So how many we have to interview to understand impact, where the impact would be. And so, we honor the needs of small, medium-sized businesses, large organizations, but also enterprise businesses. And so when we go in there, right, if you have 300 to 500 people, that is a different number of voices that need to be heard than if we're going into like an enterprise organization where we may need to interview several hundreds or thousands, probably hundreds, to get saturation. And to understand like what are the patterns and how are they segmented across the different functional areas or across geographies or whatever. So my approach is that we would our team would go in, and it's anywhere, the diagnostics is probably about a month. And the diagnostics is really the alignment part of it. And then from there, we get into the interviews and surveys. And that could take several months, more like somewhere between 3 and 9 months, roughly. It depends on the size of the organization. And it also depends on if we're focusing on a specific segment of the organization. So that can happen too. And then the delivery of that. Beyond the delivery of that, that's the immediate impact can start right then. So within, let's say, 3 to 6 months, 3 to 9 months, we go from understanding what we're trying to solve for to understanding where the problems exist and also the solutions from the voice of the people in proximity to the work, and then delivering what the people are actually saying. It's at that moment that impact can start. So that's somewhere in the 3 to 6, after diagnostics, like a 3 to say 6-9 month range. We can be delivering findings throughout, though, of course. Once we have some collected amount of data, we can start to emerge the findings. And then from that point onward, it's a matter of, it's up to leadership really to decide what we emerge is going to be implemented. And then we also offer executive coaching services and milestone checkmark moments, right? So pulse kind of moments throughout to see where and when things are happening, how things are being deployed, and if they're effective. So those are sort of like little miniature research engagements. On the individual side, that engagement is 6 to 8 weeks, and we're taking people through an arc of a journey. It's very acute. It's very deliberate to not just create some envisioning or dreamy kind of idea of what life could be. It's actually putting in accountability partners, and it's placing coaching, and it's also placing productivity tools in line with this arc. So we start here, we end there, and then we have beyond that also similarly like pulse checks and camaraderie that we offer, and coaching services that we offer to keep things continuously in line with what that vision, and until the vision is executed.
is it hard for leaders to actually see what's going on in their organizations? On your experience, if we have some organization, mid-level retail organization, for example, which have several hundred of people on board, how it's unpacking from the leadership side?
Yeah, I mean, I think leadership immediately starts to see that the people respond to, let's say it again, like to respect, right? They respond to being respected for their point of view. So it's almost immediate, right? That people start to say, okay, well, hey, they're asking me, so they must value me in my point of view. And so that's like, when leaders acknowledge that, they immediately show that to their people respond in loyalty or contribution. They just do. So it's pretty immediate.
Speaking about this, the process, we have also a lot of talks about the fancy tools that can sometimes could be brought to the organization and could quote fix everything. So for example, the retail organizations are buying the fancy new ERP systems, PLM platforms, AI tools, and so on. But where does the human side get underestimated here, how it costs here?
Yeah, so I really appreciate this question. As of more recently, a huge part of Sovera's effort is focused on the complementary evolution of, I have a background in digital transformation work for several years. And something that's always been important to me and what my first consulting practice was focused on is the user adoption part of it, right? How are the humans experiencing and adopting the thing that is being encouraged for them for their use by leaders, right? Those who are making decisions that we have to evolve from a technology standpoint because we need the data, we need better read on financials and whatever it is, or sustainability, whatever the initiatives are. And it's sort of like, well, that's great if the people are naysayers or they don't want to change, the change management component, right, as we have historically known it, is often not something that technology companies will uptake. They'll say, we do the digital transformation, the technology transformational work, right? We're going to partner with somebody else to do the human change of all of that, business process and all that kind of stuff. Technology, when looked upon as a change mechanism, yes, it is that, but it's actually to feed that same vision that we've been talking about, right, from the C-suite. It's a foundational support to enabling that. It's not just something that we're asking people to do just because we're asking them to do it for no other good reason. It's to support the vision. When people understand just that, then they're more likely to say, okay, well, how is it going to impact me? What does it change about my day, right? So what Sovera's lately been talking much about is complementing AI transformation. So as we evolve into frontier firms, which is happening, it is not going anywhere. We might not like the environmental impact of it all. We might not have all of the math figured out on what it's going to take to power those transformations. They're happening anyway. We'll solve, to whatever extent we like it or not, that part of it will somehow get solved, right? There are plenty of innovators out there figuring out all that stuff, all the big heavy lifting on, where the data is going to sit, how it's going to churn, how it's going to get powered, how we're going to keep the environment safe and all that stuff. But it is happening, and it's already happening. We've seen massive layoffs just in the last 6 to 8 months, right? Because of AI and frontier firm initiatives. So then it's like, okay, great. Where are the humans? How are humans experiencing all of that? And this is change making in a whole new evolution of what change management means or has meant up until this point. This is the first time in history that it's going to mean something completely different than it did, really probably since the dot-com boom, 20, almost 30 years ago. And so Sovera sits there too, because we have our digital transformation background and we understand how it has been. We've evolved into the AI transformational work. How are humans experiencing it? What is the value of humans in the loop? And what does that skills gap look like to adopting AI in this frontier firm sort of phased approach that is happening? How do they join us here, right? Because it's not going anywhere. And then how do we encourage the mindset to shift as well? There are plenty of people who will retire because they don't want to engage it. I have several relatives who are just leaving because they're like, I'm not even going to go there. They don't have to. But bulk of the workforce will. And we have younger generations who are digital natives, right? Basically the millennial generation and all of the Gen Zs and all of the subsequent generations are digital natives. They just are. They know they will never have to work the way that the previous generations did. And they won't do it, and they don't have to do it, and they know that. So we have a lot to learn from them and how they're receiving what work experience will look like for them, and designing for them. We have to, because they are going to be the adopters of AI transformation. And so listening to them is really going to matter. And then it's going to become, I think, largely about how we measure what work looks like in the future. So it goes right back to the initial reason for why Sovera exists, right? Is how are we restructuring work in a new era? It's been needing a restructure for 60, 70 years. So we're already behind. So we have to hurry up and catch up and be part of this evolution, and also think about where we're going for the future and design for that. We have to listen to the people.
Yes, a lot of work ahead of us. Yes,
it's okay. It's doable, and it's faster than ever. So that's the good news.
Definitely. Yes.
Yeah.
By the way, do you have a lot of resistance while the whole change management process?
So this is a little bit of the magic of the approach, right? It is because we're not descending upon people to say, this is happening, you have to sink or swim. That may be the reality, right? People will either uptake it or they won't, and they won't have a job. And especially with AI, it's going to be people who understand how to manage AI and incorporate it in their jobs. And the naysayers are going to have a much harder time finding work. That's just like, this is not my opinion, this is just what it is. And so we want people to stay in the workforce, because that's what makes the world go round, right? We are contributing in some way, back to the meaning part of it, right? The human potential, human purpose kind of driven work. And so pushback, yes, there's a ton of pushback. There's a lot of fear. People have a lot of fear, but the approach matters a lot. Hearing what those fears are, asking the people, what's the worst that can happen? Like really hearing from them, what will you do if you don't adopt these things, right? Like what does that look like for you? It's not to put more fear. It's to kind of emerge the reality of where things are and where things are going. You either want to be a part of it or you don't, right? And if you intend to work, you're going to have to be. That's it. Unless you're in certain professions that are not yet going to evolve because of AI. Directly, I mean, everything will change because of AI, but I mean direct impact to work. Anyway, so yes, it's usually rooted in fear or just resistance. And so we have to relax that. And the way to relax it is to listen to what's going on. Why? Why is there a fear? Why is there resistance?
While you having this experience on maybe some the project that failed, what was the main trigger for it? What was the foundation?
Yeah, I mean, I think these are still true as they have been for decades, that projects typically fail when there's an aimlessness as to why they're doing it, right? So it does go back to alignment and sharing the objective. And so then that's when we have to give agency to people to say, like, I believe in that thing or I don't, right? If they don't believe in it, then that's an easy mutual separation. And that's fine, because that's good for everybody, right? It's good for the person who needs to leave for their own, so they can find their own space, right? Their own way to contribute in the way they want to. But if we can try to prevent that from happening by making the thing so important and so clearly understood, and their contribution to that thing clearly understood by the individual, then they're less likely to leave. So, so I think that when there are failures, it's because there's a lack, that the bridge is broken, right? Between why we're doing it, what we're doing and why we're doing it, and what it means to the individuals who are contributing to that thing. If there's failure beyond that, it's usually because there's some sort of like leadership turnover, and we start to move in a different direction, like the ship is steering in a totally different direction, or through different approaches. And then still the truth is the same. Whatever's changing about that needs to be shared. Right? This is changing. It's not, we were going here and now we're going there, and here's why. Here's where we're going, what we're doing, here's why, here's your place in that. So that part of it doesn't really change. So that's kind of what it comes down to. We had We had this sort of happen to us when I was still at LVMH and I was working on a massive global implementation of a piece of technology on-prem. This was many years ago. And we had leadership shift during the project. And what we were doing here, we were going this way, and it wasn't that big of a step to where we had to redirect, but it was a redirection. And it was under new leadership and different approaches and all of that. And we just had to kind of bring everybody over and go in this way. And it didn't really set us back too much, but it definitely was an awareness that we had to pay attention to. We're still doing it for these reasons. You know, this is still what we're trying to achieve. This is still our goal. And then we can all kind of find our place within that.
Great. First things first, I'm also agree with this mindset that the foundation and the core thing should be the alignment with the vision. And if people won't believe the initiative, there won't be any fancy tool, technology, mega optimized UX dashboards and so on that will change the behavior for the people. So this is actually should be on the cultural level, should be transformed and passed. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I also glad that you mentioned that this change within LVMH, and wanted to ask you to maybe guide you through your one of concrete story, some transformation or rollout that had some leadership buy-in, right technology, right budget, but still hit the wall of reality. Do you have something in mind?
So there's, one clear success story in my mind, and that was one organization where I was operating the company, and we had an awareness of very clear objectives, and I had to execute a total restructuring of the organization. We had to right-size the organization on the supply and the demand side, and we had to get the right people in the right seats, and we started with who among us. We started with interviews, and this was before I did my doctorate. So this was sort of a trial back then, even before. This was very intuitive based, not research based or data supported or anything. And it was very grassroots. So I went to every individual in the organization and I interviewed every single one of them, and I asked them a few questions. And the questions were, here's where we're going. Do you believe in it? Right? This is the vision. And I shared the vision. And then I asked them, what's in the way of us executing the vision, right? This is the roots of Sovera, by the way. And then what do you want? Do you feel like you're in the right position? What do you want personally? What is your ambition? Where do you see yourself contributing to that vision? And do you want to stay here? And then once we understood and collected all those interviews and we understood who was in the right position, who were in the wrong positions, who had lack of clarity on what they were doing or why they were doing it, then we rewrote every job description. And we got everybody in the right seats. We checked in with them to make sure that they felt good about that. And we checked in with how energized they were about contributing to the vision and their willingness to do so. And that they didn't want to leave at that point. And anyone who didn't fit into that picture, they left, or we encouraged them to leave, right? Because it wasn't what they wanted anymore. And it wasn't what the company needed. So for the well-being of all involved, we had to encourage, it became very mutual. Nobody left under duress. Nobody left angrily. It was a mutual agreed separation. The couple that we had to separate, only a couple. And then what we did, because we had that clarity and because we had the right people in the right seats, we doubled the revenue. We increased the profit margin within a year and a half. It was a major success within a year and a half. So everybody knew what they had to do, and they were all just doing it. And then you just let people do their jobs because they know what they have to do. Where things fail, it depends on how aligned it is with the parent initiatives, right? So a different organization, we were doing a massive implementation of technology, and if it's a trial, then you're taking people on this whiplash journey to see what could work and see what sticks. It's got to be real. It's got to be like, when this works, it will stay. We're not going to just trial this and then throw it away and everyone's exhausted and we lose all the people and we don't really care because we can replace them all. That's a failure, and that happened. I've seen that happen. I was involved in something like that. And if there's no plan for what happens after the thing, right, for the people involved or for the organization, then there's no point in the people don't see the point in doing it. So then they're sort of like, why am I contributing here? I'm going to go do it somewhere else where there's more, back to the respect conversation, more respect for the contribution being made. So those are failures. You know, when you ask people to do a lot of the work and the organization kind of cares, but it's more like a test. And then, you know, all these other things start, the negative ripple starts to happen. So I very much focus on how do we make positive ripples happen, right? Start small, go big, start big, go small, whatever it is, and lighting up the lighthouses. I had a really good conversation with somebody that I met through LinkedIn, actually, and she shared with me this notion of lighting up lighthouses, right? And to kind of light up the dark sea. And it's like, okay, well, if we can light up human purpose and light up each other's contribution, then it's such a more joyful way of being, a more joyful existence. And everybody is contributing their best. And imagine then where we can go as humans, right? Like as this moment in human society and human history. So that's where I prefer to stay there than on where things could go wrong. Because I think if we structure things properly, then we're equipped to kind of like mitigate the things going wrong. We're more equipped because there's trust and there's relationships and there are, you know, there's belief in the thing, that whatever it is, right?
Love it. I love what you're saying, and I'm definitely agree on all of this. So the main theme for it that for this specific case that you mentioned, that the vision from the org level, from leadership, wasn't well communicated with the whole organization. So this is maybe I think the whole point of this misalignment.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And so it does go back to alignment very much, and transparency. Mm-hmm.
And if you would have power to maybe design a whole organization from the scratch, for example, like data architecture in the system, what would you measure and in which way, so to make it more effectively, having your experience as a background?
So I think that in any organization, the functional areas need to be identified, right? And then they need to complement each other rather than working in silos, which is pretty typical, right? Those who work in different functional areas kind of work within their area with their blinders on, and they're just doing that day-to-day work. When you break down those walls across, like interoperably across the departments, that's when the harmonization happens. When that harmonization happens, and as long as it's maintained and cultivated, truly like evolving, and the evolution of that is led by good leadership, transparently sharing what is evolving about it and what the new objectives are. That's almost unstoppable, right? The risk is how it's trickling down or rippling out into the individuals. And so then you need really good managers, really good supervisors who know how to appreciate all different contributions to the vision. And, you know, as a leader, you know, it's very important to me that the organizational chart, you know, we talk about flat organizations or hierarchical ones where you have like top-down stuff. The truth is everyone is contributing to something. They're just in different ways, different capacities of contribution. The CEO is contributing in a way that others are not contributing. They complement each other. One is creating vision, the others are executing the vision. What are they doing to execute the vision is the part that becomes important. The managers in between, the supervisors in between are critical, right, in translating what's really going on and how it's getting done. They have really critical, important jobs. And so everyone it's not hierarchical. It is sort of from a structural standpoint, it's more like appreciating that everybody has really a shared contribution to the same thing, to whatever that same goal is, and through different capacities. Once that kind of relaxed, I mean, that if you think about that, it kind of does put a blanket of relaxation across the entire organization. There's less competition, everybody knows what they're doing. It's really optimal. But we get caught up. I mean, organizations get caught up. That's just what it is, right? The way it is. Yeah.
Great, love it. Okay, I think that's a wrap. Thank you for being on the show. I think we could easily extend it for 1 hour minimum, but time is up. So thank you, and we will stay in touch. I will also attach all the contact information of you below this video.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for having me.